Thanks, Marina. And I just want to thank the Ellen team, who I've worked with a few times now, and I have to say they are a dream team to work with. And I'd like to thank, of course, Vincent for inviting me into this exhibition, and to all of you, familiar and unfamiliar faces, for attending. So, where to begin? When I was offered to do this artist talk, I went through a process of reflection, trying to figure out how to open up my practice in a cohesive manner. A little difficult to do in 1 hour's time. So my background is diverse, and Marina hit some of the disciplines I've worked in. And the specifics of disciplines I've always been engaged with, the potentials and limits to each one of them. So video being very different than sculptures, concerns, or installation from, say, photography. And each discipline I've worked with, I've learned a great deal from them. But for this talk, I decided to do something I actually was trying to work around, which was talking just about works on paper. But hopefully, I will be able to bridge some of the intersections with other practices that I've worked in before with the works on paper, specifically 3 works on paper. And to locate a lot of the discussion or a lot of things I bring up within 2 ideas that have captivated me for about 15 years, which is the idea of active viewership, a viewer that is engaged in co-production, and the idea of performative document, a document that outperforms its initial function. So these are 2 concepts that I'm hoping to develop with these 3 works in particular. So starting with the obvious, and with the this exhibition, right across from us is a portion, ooh, you can't say P, a portion of of the Art Now series to my left, my right. The Art Now series, the series I began in 2005. It is a series that has a clear beginning, but no definitive end date. And so it's a series that has, I've been working in for 9 years, and with and around other projects. So there's a lot of cross-sectioning with my work with this series in particular. It is comprised of over 100 iterations, 100 drawings. And each time I show them, they are quite different in terms of selection of sequence. So to begin, the reference for each of these drawings are art books with the title, with the word now in their title. It is a parameter that has maintained itself over the course of my exploration. And the other parameter would be trying to keep it fresh, trying to keep Art Now renewed. So I'm going to, instead of talking, I'm going to show about 30 of these drawings first. So I hope you don't mind sitting in silence for 30 drawings. And because this will happen a couple of times in this talk. So I hope you're cool with that. And then I'll speak about them, this particular grouping. Okay, I can't keep quiet. So I'll let them roll. Hopefully it doesn't interrupt the viewing process. So each drawing is on 22 by 30 sheets of paper, all done with graphite. And the intention for this consistency was to create more of a non-hierarchical relationship to any of the books published. And also to create a commonality. So between its physical presence being egalitarian in nature, equalized, what also ensues is this, and I hope you've noticed that the time frames that these are all taken from, they are throughout the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. And so there's a collapse of time frames. I was interested in creating and extending the duration of now, elongating it quite a bit in order to include a past that would be considered as present, as the present is considered present. And so for me, also the choice of drawing was very specific as opposed to any other medium, because at first I thought it was going to be photo, to tell you the truth. I thought I would photograph these covers and they would do the same thing that I was interested in, which was to create a tension between time frames. But as I thought about it, that's good, okay. So as I thought about format and I thought about potential disciplines, I thought drawing would be more interesting, even though it's not my background. It's not something I studied. It's not even something I did until the series began. And I chose drawing to counteract the instantaneous or the fleeting, quick word, like now, instantaneous, and to try to create a duration individually for them, which would encourage a longer duration when looking at them as collectively as a group. Like here, this is a typical way that I would install them. Of course, many more. This is the smallest amount I've ever shown at once. So for me, there's an optimistic relationship to the notion of art now that I tried to carry throughout the series. Optimistic, believing in, ideas of the new, but not so much new, but ideas of the importance of the present tense, not just looking at things made in this time frame, but things that made prior that informed this time frame. So there's a collapse between the structure that I was working with, the publications, and then developing my own structure within the work. I was trying to collide those, but also challenge them. So between 2005 and 2011, I explored this notion and also visited a ton of libraries to see how the now was framed through publications, how the now was represented. And each now presents a distinct trajectory, especially early on when it was a distinctive move away from certain conventions or trying to highlight certain disciplines that were being developed. So each had its own, what's the good word for that? Its own specificity, thank you. I like that when someone gives me a word. So it came to a head, my thought process, and especially when I was invited into the triennial in 2011, where, in 2011, if I can just get back there. Sorry about this. And I don't know how many of you saw this exhibition, not that that's important right now, but it had a certain kind of, I hoped I created a certain kind of experience. Anyway, during this time, I was thinking about art now, and of course, and also how a lot of the books that I was working with and was trying to ignore, especially books that were really using this term that I felt that was quite positive in nature. You're beginning to see in the turn of the millennium a shift from looking at art that was trying to show a distinct train of thought to more of a marketing structure. And the best example would be the Taschen series, where the Taschen series becomes this like showroom in book form and more of a marketing strategy. And I was trying to maintain my optimism in terms of thinking of art in the present tense. But I knew that at one point I would have to really deal with how the Taschen books, but also a lot of catalogs, frame art in a particular manner that restricts them. And then I'm in the triennial. And I decided to talk about the very structure that creates such large-scale exhibitions. And I tried doing this by picking a particular site in the exhibition, which is the hallway, peripheral to the galleries themselves. And wanting to talk about the structure somewhat of these kinds of events, these spectacular visual arts events that we see commonly now with the biennials and the triennials. So by situating in the hallway, I had this wonderful opportunity to reflect on the very thing that I'm involved in, but also to have this intersection between the works themselves and their intentions, and then the site matching it for the first time. Usually I showed in solo exhibitions and artist-run centers, which are more about a criticality, but you're away from, it's more speculation than being in the midst of. This presented something different. The added aspect to this is the entry point. In order to access the galleries, you had to go through the hallway. In order to leave the galleries, you had to enter the hallway. And for me, this entry, this excitement, I was hoping that the Art Nows would create an excitement to what you're about to see. But also when you come out, you would know that now was then. And then that would create another layer of understanding and relating to the actual drawings themselves. Much more encompassing some of the thought processes I had. And the other aspect of it, and specific to this exhibition, is that the hallway joins or connects two banks of galleries on either side, one on one side, one on the other side. And for me, this is where the optimistic aspect of the work comes in, that it would join, it would be a bridge from one to the next. And I was hoping that would happen, but that didn't happen, partly because of curatorial decisions. So my optimistic side wasn't able to exist here, but so it became much more about a critique in the end, unbeknownst to me. So when I speak about performative documents, especially in this work, or when I think about performative documents, the site really does create the performativity in these individual drawn documents of art covers, art book covers, with the word now in their title. And in terms of active viewership, I'm trying to engage in a dialogue that extends much, or tries to acknowledge a system that is quite beyond me. And that sometimes gets overlooked, that I'm not creating these works in a way, or the references of these works, they are already pre-existing, which I think is an interesting distinction, because a lot of times I get associated with machine activity. And I feel like, and this system is a machine that works with or without me. I'm just trying to bring attention to it. So I'm just changing something. As I was working on the Art Now series, and I also was working on another project called The Following Piece. And it was made between July 8th, 2008 to June 2nd, 2010. It's another durational work, a 2-year-long endeavor. I know. As I was researching the Art Nows, I couldn't help but notice the reoccurrence of the following piece by Vito Acconci. And here's one. This is a drawing of mine. And because I was spending so much time in the library, certain kinds of connections come up. What I found fascinating was how often I would see this image in different types of publications. Now, I was researching a huge time frame with the Art Now series, so I couldn't help but look at books in the vicinity of the books I was looking at. And so I kept on seeing this one, this particular work. For those of you who do not know this work, it's a piece by, like I said, Vito Acconci, and he's a New York-based artist, mostly known for his performance works, and also known as a poet. And he decided in October 1969 to select a person and follow them through the streets of New York until they arrived at a private dwelling where he couldn't enter, and that's when the following would end. So each day, he would follow a different person, male or female. It was really not selective. I think he just decided as he went along. So, and he made a number of entries. This work is usually just represented with this particular photograph most often, or I'm saying photograph, or in groupings of 3 others, and you'll see some of those in a moment. So what I did was I followed him through print, and I followed him through print, trailing his structure or paralleling his structure of following. But at the same time, I recorded every instance in which I found it. So what happens is that each drawing describes really the page layout, the architecture of the page. And I think I'm gonna, again, put you in silence and show you this because I think it's much easier after it's viewed. This is much longer than the previous sequence. There's 53 iterations of this work. So, go there. The next grouping of drawings coming up is, it's the only area where the image doesn't exist. It's all the text that's associated with each one of the following days. That Acconci, like right here. So each day he would make notes as to where he went, what the person looked like he was following. And I included this in the series because I thought it was as relevant as the image. So I just wanted to explain that. Okay, this is the last one. And I kind of really had to do that to you. I wanted you to feel how relentless it is. Because it is a relentless endeavor. Seeing this work, And for me, the most exciting, and maybe not so exciting actually, one of the most interesting aspects was to see how this piece was kept in the present tense. It was, and if you were looking at the publication dates, they fluctuated and they spanned the last 40 years. And with my research, it was really interesting how I didn't have to look that hard. I would go into the library, open a book, and there he was. It was really not an intensive research that I did. It was more like it was just so available. And I actually, it's so much bigger than me, this, how he's represented through art. Like being so important to conceptual art in the 70s, to performance art in the 80s, to public art in the 90s, to surveillance and new media in the 2000s, especially new media, because in new media at the time, in the early 2000s, was trying to create its own history and was grabbing visual arts references everywhere. So Vito Conci was cited for a lot of it. So, you know, and because I was working on art now and I was thinking of art in the present tense, and then I saw this piece being represented in the present tense for the last 40 years, I began to wonder how art is being represented, but also how one piece has the capacity to fit within almost every theoretical framework available in the last 40 years, which is, if you look, you'll find him in this particular work. And I think the one reason why is that the following piece has such an open structure. The notion, basically, it's a proposition in a lot of ways. And to be specific, the documents that represent the work are not actually the work. They were remade for the purposes of dissemination. So Vito Conci talks about wanting to create the work as a rumor. And the rumor, everybody knows a rumor. Sometimes a rumor is so much bigger than the actual thing it talks about. And I think it succeeds in a big way. But it made me really question how, you know, theorists and theory are actually utilizing work and artworks. So this came into play at the time, and to get back to the relentlessness of it, to draw these photorealistically is not an easy task. And I spent 2 years trying to render them as best I could, sometimes better than others, because I was frustrated with the text around it and the mistakes around it, because it was quite fascinating to see how many errors were made with the details of the work. Probably the best source, just for a note to students of mine that are in the room and other students, that October magazine, the periodical October, is probably the most accurate you'll get for any information on a work, from my experience. So, the other thing that I ran into with this work is it's very difficult to show. I will not show it in sections. I refuse to show it in sections because part of it is, when you look at it, they almost look like photocopies. And the image is not mine. It's someone else's work. The text is not mine. It's another artist's text. I exclude, of course, the body of text from a given author. But Vito's voice is quite loud. It's dominant. And so it completely overshadows any gesture of mine. And I did this on purpose, in a way, in an ethical manner, because I really felt like I didn't want to make it ironic. I wasn't interested in making fun of anything. I've never been a maker that whenever I appropriate another artist's work, that I will dishonor it. It's more like trying to have a sincere interaction with it. And for this work, the only thing that is a voice is the size of the number of iterations it provides, because that kind of unravels the like how it is functioning and how it disseminates through art history, specifically. So, this is the second work that I wanted to present. And of course, again, it functions and exists much further than my notation of it. Like drawing it 53 times, I just decided to stop because I was tired of like drawing it It wasn't like this is the only 53 times it's presented in print publications. It's much larger than me. I'm only one person, and this is the amount of time I spent with it. But that's all I wanted to say about that, other than that it was brutal. It was brutal to do. Okay, so another work on paper and continuing this idea of publication, but this time I made a publication. And I'll just outline the two components of it, operational components of it. It is a publication on newsprint. The way it began was through one operation where I took a series of photographs of a sunset in Kamouraska, Quebec, and relied on the automatic power off of the camera to establish an interval between pictures, which was about 3 minutes. By the time I took a picture and then it automatically shut off, it would be a 3-minute interval. So here are some of the images of the sunset. Kamouraska is quite picturesque. But of course I decided to keep it in black and white so it's not as picturesque. And that was really, I try to stay away from ornamentation a great deal, and really try to focus on emphasize ideas rather than ideas of beauty. So my aesthetics are quite specific. And so I was given the opportunity to have an exhibition at Clark Gallery here in Montreal. And it's an artist-run center, for those of you who haven't gone to Clark. And with this particular piece, I was interested in working with the center. Clark is quite wonderful. It has the same ideology of the Artist-Run Network when it began in the 70s. It's quite idealistic in some ways, where it promises to have artists support other artists' production. And so I was very intrigued by that, because I was surprised, am surprised, or not so much surprised, but it's changing a great deal and has been changing a great deal for the last 15 years. And most of the artist-run centers have turned into more institutionalized frameworks, turned towards institutionalized frameworks. And Clark still is trying to maintain this artist membership, and with the artist members, they also are the administrators. So how administration is done usually is quite different, because it's more trying to keep in tandem with the art being produced. So I was interested in this site, and I called the show Situation. So when I printed the 3,000 copies, my intention was to have all 3,000 copies removed from the gallery space during the course of the exhibition. 3,000 visitors at Clark, which doesn't really happen. There's 3,000 visitors at Clark. I don't even know if the MAC gets 3,000 visitors a month. I don't know. So when I began, this is the installation shot. It's quite minimal. 3,000 copies of this publication were put on a skid and delivered to the gallery, and I put the skid in the middle of the gallery. And there's a graphite line drawn around the circumference of the gallery walls as a way of holding the space, but also as a gauge for the removal of each publication. Because there's a kind of a contract between me and the viewer in this work, where I'm hoping that they will participate in the completion of the piece. So I'll show you what happened on the last day. There's still quite a few. And lucky that I spoke to the administrators at Clark, and they agreed to house the work until it was complete, even if it went beyond the parameters or the time frame of conventional exhibition times. So like the exhibition was only 6 weeks, so I had to find a way to still continue the exhibition somewhere else in the gallery itself. And it ended up in the hallway. Because, like I knew that it wouldn't complete, it wouldn't be completed, but I was also interested in seeing how the Clark would deal with it to a certain degree, or any artist-run center would deal with it. Because sometimes when you make a work, it just doesn't fit into convention. And I was wondering if there was still that capacity in artist-run centers that would actually care for the parameters of the work rather than maintain the conventions. And so it was kind of an experiment, a grand experiment, and a grand proposition for me to see how we were functioning in the arts. And ultimately it could have just ended and no one would have known about it. It would have been a disappointment to me for sure, because I actually wanted to see how it would play out. And more towards a negotiation of it than the actual thing you're looking at. So it was interesting to watch how people remove these publications, because they look like Metro newspapers that you see in the Metro. They're not very special in terms of how they were made. They're very ordinary, very everyday, and I wanted that every day there. And I wanted to see if anybody would actually want to reperform the sunset by removing it from the gallery and helping create a work, because that's what the contract was. Not said, but that's what it was. So this idea of a document performing itself, this is how it manifested in this instance. It took 2 years to complete. It was last year in the spring when all the publications were removed. And it was a very interesting experience, I have to say, this work. So I want to move right to something. I want to move back into the gallery with you and talk about a little further exhibition and exhibition histories, mine in this gallery in particular. In 2011, the Ellen Gallery decided to buy 10 of the 10 drawings from the Art Now series. And I was, and this is the installation. A year later, there was a show called Interactions, curated by Melanie Rainville from here, from the gallery, head of collections, and they were included. Now, the interesting aspect to me about this was that when I showed the work at the MAC, from the triennial that I showed you the image in the hallway, right? I was wondering about how to re-engage or re-enter the gallery after taking such a position. That I took a critical position to exhibitions, and I didn't know how I was going to re-enter the space, re-enter in a different way. Because each time I've shown the Art Now series in particular, I've always shown new works in each exhibition. But also, I've never been in a position where I was so critical of the framework that I was involved in. So when the pieces when the other portions of the series got sold or acquired and then exhibited, it was like I found myself in this predicament where I really had to reconsider the entire series and where I was going with it, how I was going to renew it. So, which brings me more to the present time right now. So when me and Vincent were discussing the exhibition that you're all sitting in right now, part of the conversation was in and around this idea of recontextualizing previous exhibitions. And because I've shown this work in this gallery before, and I've had a few shows in this gallery before, I thought it was an interesting opportunity to, one, reconsider the Art Now series. So that's what happened, is that I made another grouping of drawings to in this space, but I placed them. This is the first iteration for the show that you see on the wall, are projected. Because what's on the wall now and what's on the screen are two different things, because there's been 2 installments. Anyway, with the show Intersections, it was placed right where they are now. I was interested in readjusting the Art Now series and recontextualize the Art Now series, but use the same exhibition parameters. So 1 inch apart in a straight line in the same spot. And that's how it looked between November 14th and December 23rd of last year, the beginning of the exhibition. And then I tried taking it 1 step further, trying to keep Art Now refreshed, but in a different way. And I installed, these are the ones. I'm just gonna flip through these quickly because I didn't wanna, these are the first set. And then, well, we're seeing 2 images of it. It's kind of weird, but on the wall and projected. So there's 2 sets that occurred. Now the major difference between the first groupings up until 2011 and then the more recent ones for this exhibition is that most of the ones prior and all the ones say like, most of them are all generalized representations of exhibitions or practices. What these are in the more recent iterations or sequences is they're all artist books, mostly. So this idea of singular as opposed to plural or generalized voice, I'm shifting in the Art Now series. So to me, this was an interesting development because it meant that I felt closer to the books I was working with because it was a voice of an artist. But also, I found myself reacting and drawing quite differently than I had in the past. And even though this is all really fast for me, because it's only been a couple of weeks since these have been up, you can see the difference of how I'm using the page, but also how I'm using the text and how they're cropped, how they're closer up. So these kinds of reactions is another point of interest for me of how I'm recording things because I'm reacting. And at times I don't even know I'm reacting until, of course, afterwards in reflection, looking at them later. So this idea of active viewership comes up within form some of the time, most of the time, but also in my engagement with the ideas around the series. Like it's been very difficult to try new ways of refreshing this body of work. And this new trajectory I'm quite thrilled by because it just seems much more open and light than the previous. And so who knows like if it's ever gonna end for me, but so, and the other thing that is to note is that they're local. They're all really local books. Anything that's not an artist book is like, for example, Feminism Now, Theory and Practice is a Montreal publication specifically. Or Environments Now with a local artist, Lynn Cohen, involved in that cover or that catalog. So all of them have this, instead of this distant relationship, have a very close up relationship. And I was really interested in trying to not just speak and point to an Art Now, but actually embrace it as current. That's why all of them don't have dates any longer. So it's more like when you're looking at them, you feel like it's the present tense as opposed to a reflection of a different time. Because what happens with the word now, you're always like, it's always fleeting. It's always fleeting. And I wanted the experience of viewing to be much different than the previous manifestations of the work. So I think I'll open it up for discussion because I think I'm getting too involved in detail, which is very easy when you're dealing with 150 images in this talk. So how's that, Marina? Is it okay? No problem. Okay.
seems okay. We're not getting any interference. Does anybody have a question for Thérèse?
Well, I bombarded you. Don't worry about it. You have a comment?
Hi, Isabel. Nice to
Hi,
meet you,
Isabel.
everyone. I was just wondering if you found ironic the fact that you chose to publish your art into the hallway, and in another time frame, you ended up being in the hallway without you deciding it.
Oh no, I totally decided the hallway.
You
It was
did?
site specific. Yeah.
Even for the pamphlet one,
The who?
Your big, the 3,000 publication.
Oh, that I didn't choose.
Exactly.
I
Did
would
you-
have preferred it being in the main gallery, but I mean, you can't really take up that much space.
But I just,
But yeah.
it's maybe a bit ironic, maybe like without even, like it's still.
Oh yeah, hallway.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still
I'm always
fun.
kicked to the curb. It seems like, yeah.
Just thought it was ironic that.
Just joking. Uh-oh.
Hi, no, it's not
Hi.
just a question, Dee.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about the piece also in front of Andrea Fraser that's also part of the same exhibition? And just to know if there's a link with that piece, or if there's...
Definitely. You know, thanks for asking that question, because it was part of my dilemma as to how to handle this talk, because that chair, the chair that is presented in front of the Andrea Fraser is a piece I made. It was a sitting situation I made for a videotape from 1999. And I wanted to show that tape, actually, because of the particularities of the tape in relation to the chair. And I think Vincent's taking the chair in here. It's a fold-up chair. It's called 1.5 seater, because literally 1.5 people can sit on it, or you negotiate quite a bit. So this is my only utilitarian sculpture ever. You're gonna oh, thanks, Vincent. Anybody want to sit beside Vincent? So the chair was made with this video called "We're Trying To," where I fought another artist, physically fought, and I was speaking about at the time about what was I speaking about? Wait, what was I doing? Oh, of oh my God, I'm having a mental blank. Thanks. I was thinking about notions of active viewership. This is why I kept on saying that term in the talk, because it's been following me for a long time. And so active viewership, where the inside and outside of a situation is collapsed. So like as I'm fighting, and I was fighting another artist, we were both hooked up to shutter release cables, and we were shooting and fighting at the same time. And so I mean, like, you know, we're not very good at fighting, the both of us, and we were quite horrible at it, and it just looked like we were goofs. But nevertheless, to me, it presented something interesting, and so I tried to create a chair that would talk about negotiation, because representational negotiation was happening on the screen. So I thought a physical negotiation would be an interesting dynamic. So does that answer your question? No problem. So Andrea Fraser, using the chair for Andrea Fraser for that piece, I thought was actually quite good for some of the things I was thinking about. Anyway, there was a nice interplay. So I was delighted when Vincent asked me if I would include it. Yeah. Thanks for the demonstration.
Any other questions?
T, was this? Okay.
I
was
know.
This
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I know.
I know. Wow.
Okay. Was this the first time of showing? I guess not. It's maybe
What?
not. Just, I had always seen art now in the context of other contemporary art, and I guess, I mean, question about that it is contemporary art, but I just felt like the.
With
did
this
you
work, you're talking about this work right
yes,
now?
this work here in this exhibition.
Yeah.
Was there a difference in terms of the the temporality of the other works in relationship to what you were showing? Like, I don't know if there
With
was.
the last set, like the other set that I showed,
No, I'm talking more
like these ones.
the context of Vincent's exhibition and showing art now versus art now in shows with works that are all about works that are made around the same period of time. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Okay.
Does anybody else? Do you know? I'm trying to remember. No, I don't. No, I don't understand.
No, I know. I don't know if I'm not formulating because I don't know. I haven't seen every single iteration of art now. I'm just thinking about the other times I've seen it, which was at the MAC and at the show at Vox, and it was more in a. Not that this isn't contemporary, because now I'm getting stuck in this idea of now and
the contemporary.
But I just remembered when I saw this show, thinking, oh, works that are made now versus works that were older. That there was like a nice evenness that I found was working well in this show, and I wondered how you felt about your Art Now series in relationship to this particular context of the show. That's all I was getting at.
Okay.
I don't know if
Well, no, that's a good question, and it is different, because that's one reason why there's 2 installments. Because in the one instance, in the first installment of the 10 Art Nows, I was interested in trying to recontextualize the Art Now series, one in which that was looking and more focused on local productions. And so I feel like I tried to accomplish something, and these are the drawings, right? Like my personal favorite is that one, and so I felt like I still had more to say, and that's why I changed the drawings during the winter break, and decided that I'm going to do Art Now for the new year, but with the understanding that I had more of an understanding what was in the show and the experience of the show. So these were drawn, most of them were drawn when the show opened. I was drawing these in response to the other works within this exhibition, trying to have an interplay. Plus my interest with the word art now, or the word now in art, trying to create a duration, a longer duration than just the present tense, that it can include a past tense, and which each would be equivalent, is part of the motivation for the series. So being amongst like Mary Kelly in front of me, and then General Idea on the other side, and Ian Wallace, like to me, I felt like I was really in contemporary art, because these works have such resonance, all of them, throughout history since they were made. So, and then my decision by accident not to include dates reinstated this idea of the present tense. And that was just my development of the work, which kind of or found its home in this kind of context. Does that answer your question, Kim?
Better the non-inclusion of dates. I
Yeah.
thought about that, but there just seemed to be something going on in the show that was different than other iterations of your.
And it was
Art
really
Now
the
series
dates.
well, no, but now I'm anyways, thanks. That's
Okay.
helpful. Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, Daniel.
I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about typographical errors.
I know I have a lot, hey?
There does happen to be one up there, and I'm wondering if it's deliberate, if you're copying it, or if you sometimes
No,
don't
that's
know it.
me. That's me.
Or you just go with it?
No, this one I just thought was funny. Like, demonstrate, right? I like sometimes I find there's humor in error, and sometimes I leave them, and sometimes I redraw them. So there is a distinct decision. Like in one of them, an early one, I remember instead of multiples, I wrote multiples, and I thought it was hilarious. Like, and so that's me in the Art Now series. When there's an error, it's usually me. In the Akanchi series, if there's an error, it's the publisher. Just to make it clear.
Anyone else?
Or the falling piece, I mean. Akanchi.
Anyone else? No? Thank you. That
Thank
was
you for
really
coming
wonderful.
out. And
Thanks
thank
for a
you.
really generous talk.
I abbreviated so much.